Hello, my name is Randy Ripke. I'm the developer of TASbiller Cloud. The following video will help explain features of the program. If you have any questions, please feel free to email or call. I hope you enjoy your use of TASbiller Cloud. Hello again, this is Randy Ripke, the developer of TASbiller Cloud. This video will cover templates and how to edit them and create your own. When I set up your cloud database, you'll be given a set of default sample templates to start with, and you can either create your own or you can use mine and modify them to meet your needs. The invoice can be customized to have your company logo and any other graphics you would like to include on the invoice. It can be in color, it can have different fonts and different print sizes, as you can see on this example. Before we get too far, I want to talk a little bit about what are known as pixels and some graphics. Back in the good old days of the dot matrix printer, we had a fixed number of characters and lines per page. Now with current day laser printers and PDF media, we can have graphics, we can have fonts of different sizes on the same piece of paper and different colors, of course. To do this, we'll be working with a unit called a pixel. Let me show you some examples of pixel. When you Google it, you're going to find some very fascinating descriptions. This one defines a pixel as the minute area of illumination on a display screen. We need to look at how big is a pixel. This is my next favorite one. To calculate the size of a pixel, we can use the Pythagorean theorem. I'm sure all of us remember this from college calculus. Now there are some easier ways to get at least close to what we need to use for our design purposes. There are also calculators and examples on the web you can look up, but the primary one we're going to look at here is to recognize that 1 inch equates to approximately 96 pixels. This is both vertical and horizontal. So going back to our example, this piece of paper, for example, is 8.5 by 11, meaning the overall width of this page is 816 pixels wide by 1056 pixels tall. This will come into play a little bit later when we start designing the invoice templates. One other thing to be aware of are the graphics that you use. Now I have some samples here, and you've probably seen this globe that I use as the logo for my demo invoices. Now I purchased this online, and when I just open it, you can see it's quite large. If I right-click on this graphic and go to Properties and Details, I can see that this graphic is in fact 657 pixels wide by 728 pixels tall. In other words, it's nearly the entire size of a piece of paper. This is what's referred to as the native size of the graphic. To use these graphics within our templates, we need to reduce them before we include them in our templates. With HTML and the way the internet works and different web browsers and email servers, these graphics have a tend to revert to what's called their native size. So we don't want this logo to suddenly occupy the entire invoice page. We want it to stay small. Now to do that from our original, there are a couple different ways. It's pretty easy. I like to use the program called Paint, which is included with Windows. So I right click on the graphic, I choose Open With, and then choose Paint, and here's my graphic. Now there's a function within Paint I can choose to resize the object. Now say I want this globe graphic to be about 1 inch square on my invoice. And we know we're going to work with pixels. And we know a pixel is about 96, or 1 inch is about 96 pixels. So if I change this to 96, it's going to resize it for me. So now I know that this graphic will be 96 pixels or 1 inch wide. It's going to be a little bit taller, and that's probably due to this shadow and some white area toward the bottom of the graphic. And when I apply this you can see how much how much smaller it makes my graphic. I would then save this as the resized image, which I've already done. So I'm not going to save this here, but if I right click on this one, for example, and go to properties, I can see this globe is a little bit less than an inch actually, which is what I like to have for the templates I've been showing you. So when you get your logos from your graphics artist or whoever designed your company logos, again, they're going to come out rather large, and you'll need to open them in some kind of a paint program or editing program and resize them down to the size that you want to use in TASbiller Cloud. What I usually do is save them as a couple of different sizes. Like here I have a small globe, which you can see is 100 by 110, and a smaller globe, which is 75 by 83. This way I can upload these into the cloud and switch between them and see which ones look better to me. Now within TASbiller itself, we go to File Maintenance and Templates, and here are all of our templates. This may seem a bit overwhelming at first, but there's only 4 of them to work with. Starting at the bottom, we have our payment template, payment received rather. This is the notification that is emailed to you when one of your customers pays you online. To look at the template, we can click on Edit, and this is the template that I receive when someone pays using the online Pay Now button. You can edit this. I'll show you an example shortly of what the actual email looks like when you get it. I've been formatting these to be kind of a narrow width instead of using the full page of paper. This is a little bit more phone friendly. A lot of people are using smartphones these days to read emails. This is a lot cleaner and easier to read. Something else I want to show you is all of this layout is incorporated in what's called a table. So you can see these little squares in the corner. This is showing me the outline of the size of the table I have. If I right click within the table and look at the table properties, this is telling me that this table is 300 pixels wide and it's divided up into this grouping of cells, with each cell being its own width and the 2 side by side here totaling 150. And I have several different groupings of cells. And the reason I do that is so I can take one part of the invoice template and say I want this logo, instead of being centered, I want it to be left justified. Well, I don't want my payment notification wording to be left justified. I want it to remain centered. So I can have this cell centered where this cell is now left justified. If I want to put it back, click on centering, and there we go. This allows for a much cleaner presentation to the client of the data you're trying to show them. Fields will line up nicer, they'll be centered properly, and you can define this very easily by using the table function. You can add rows, delete rows, columns, same thing. Takes a little patience. While we're discussing this and working on your templates, designing your templates is not a project for billing day. This is a project that should start several days before your billing. I'm not sure about you, but my patience level with this, after about 20 or 30 minutes, I need a break. It requires concentration and attention to detail and quite a bit of testing. So be sure to allow yourself plenty of time to design your templates before you actually need to have them working live. So I just showed you the payment notification template. There's also a payment receipt template. Now this is the template that is the email the customer actually receives when they make their payment online. I'll show you an example of this in real life next. Again, it's set up with a table. I have things centered the way I want them to. I have different fonts. Some things are in bold. Different pieces are underlined. This cell, for example, if I go to the cell properties and go to more cell styling, I can look at the border and see I have a solid 1 pixel height line, and it should be in black. That's across the bottom of this cell. Now if I also want the same thing across the top, I can do that, pick the color, and now I'm going to have a 1 pixel solid line along the top and bottom of the cell I just selected. I click OK to save my changes, click OK again to exit this editing wizard, and now I have a solid line across the top and bottom of that cell that says payment receipt. Graphics are loaded using the image manager. If I click on this, I can see all the different graphics I have loaded in TASbiller Cloud. I can upload new graphics from my computer to the cloud and choose the one I want to use and insert it into the template. We're going to save these changes and close. The next template we're going to look at is the email invoice template. Now this is the email that goes out to the client that has the PDF invoice attached to it. Now I have two different varieties. I have one that has the Pay Now button and I have one without the Pay Now button. Some of you may have multiple versions of this if you have multiple companies. You may have the email with a different logo for a different company and so forth. The fields that you can include on here, I'm showing this client their invoice number, the invoice date, their account number, the name of their company, and the total of the invoice. These fields can be selected from this drop-down selection here. So any of these fields can be included in your template. Now for the fun one is the invoice itself. I'll be showing you the demo invoice. Now, a few new features we have now are this page height and a test function. So I can plug in the account number of one of my customers and click on the test button, and I'll be seeing an example based on the most recent invoice that was sent to this customer using this invoice template. Now something to be aware of on this client, this is a one-page invoice. All of their charges and the footer information all fit on one page very nicely. Now, in the case of this customer has a number of sub-accounts. So we have a first page and a second page. Now if you notice carefully on the second page, the header is slightly different than the first page header. Also the footer is slightly different. So I have a first page header that has my from and to address that would fit into a window envelope perhaps, along with other information I want the client to see on the first page. I'm then printing the detail, and my footer is just abbreviated because I still want the client to see how much they owe and my company name and that we take different credit cards. On the second page, the header is now a little bit shorter because I don't need the from and to address. I just want to remind this client that this is from my company and this is their company information and the various invoice numbers and what have you. And I have on here continued from the previous page, the page numbering going on, the charges for this invoice, and then a footer that includes, in my case, an account summary, which is showing the client how much they have in various age columns, PO numbers, various invoice messages, and notice all these different fonts can be in different sizes. They can be italicized, they can be bold, some can be larger than others. And notice the boxes here that are shaded. Again, this is a cell on a table where I've chosen a background color and a border. And I'll show you how I did that in just a moment. So getting back to our template editor, we have a first page header and then a second page header. If we click on these editing tools, this is the template for just the header portion of the first page header. I can click on one of the cells and look at the cell properties, and it tells me the size of that cell, I can go to more cell styling, and it's showing me I have a border that's 4 pixels of a double line surrounding that cell. Also here I have a background color selected, which is that light blue. Now, a couple other features to be aware of, especially if you're using, if you're printing invoices to mail or if you're using a print mail company, are the locations of the addresses. These need to fit, of course, into a window envelope at the correct location in the envelope when the invoice is folded, usually in thirds. Now, if I click on this cell, I can see that I have the alignment set to this upper left corner. This will always force the customer's name and address to be at the uppermost point of this cell and not move. If I have any other text without this formatting, it's going to float in the middle of this cell. So if this customer's address is 3 lines or 4 lines, it may float up and down based on how many lines of address information is being displayed. I can't have that happening with a window envelope. I need to have that name and address always start at a certain point and then fill the available window. So be very aware of the tools that are available to us, particularly this alignment tool. Now, this table, as you can see, is 675 pixels wide. That's the width of the entire table. I'm allowed 960 pixels on the entire page. I have the table set so that this first cell has a 25 pixel width. I'm really not using this cell for anything more than just adding to the default margin. The default margin currently is 1 centimeter. I find that to be a little bit close. So I'm adding about 1/4 of an inch. So I have about a 1/2 inch or so border around the outside of my, my invoice template. When you make changes, you always want to click to the back to design view button. If you click the cancel button, it would not save your changes. So we're going to save these changes. We go back to design view, and then to permanently save them, we would save the template, at which point you'll get this notification. So here we have the first page header, the second page header, and you can see how the second page header, here's my wording for continued from previous page. I'm not repeating this box on the second page header, but I am repeating some of the customer information. As we scroll down, now we're going to see some of the detail. So every line of detail within the body of the invoice can be defined. So the header is the description and charges. It's underlined. If we go to table properties, this table is 500 pixels wide. This first cell is again 25, just to force my margin. I then have 2 other cells, 350 and 125. The 350 is for the description, and the 125 is for the dollar amount. If I look at the properties of more cell styling and go to border, I can now see I have a solid 2 pixel underline on that heading. There's my underline. To better understand that section of the invoice, this is what we're seeing right here on the invoice. So this description header is one part of the invoice template. This description is another part. Each line you're seeing here for fixed charges, quantity charges, and sales taxes or percentage charges are separate sections. Additionally, sub-account sections are different than non-sub-account sections. Sub-accounts may have total charges for just that one sub-account, where you wouldn't have that on an individual invoice for one client. I still am, however, showing the total charges for the invoice and the footer. So let's go back to our example again. So if we look at all these pieces, the fixed charges, for example, for the sub-account are just one line. It's printing the item description, which is our posting account. This item non-recur description is any kind of description you may have made for a manual charge posting. This would also be for a one-time charge or a late fee. Whatever description you enter will show up beside the posting account on this part of the invoice, and then the charge amount for the fixed charge. Notice this charge amount field is right justified, whereas this is left justified. Scrolling all the way down, this summary section is the total charges for the invoice. Again, with a double underline and a single line over. There's a payment section. In the event the client paid by credit card, perhaps on billing day, or has any other credits that are being applied to the invoice, this is the section that if there is a payment, this section will appear. If there is no payment, this won't appear on the invoice. But you still need to have it set up in case there is a credit balance for some reason. So I can set up my headings for my payments, my payment details, the information I want to show on the invoice as far as the payment method, any comments, the credit amounts, and so forth. Lastly, we have the footers, which would be the individual page footer, which has only this information. And then we have the last page footer, which includes my summary area, which has the aging and my invoice message. Now, while we're discussing templates, let's also look at this maximum page height. I'm using 960 since I know my page is 11 inches tall, which would be 1056 pixels. I know I want about a margin of ½ inch top and bottom. So if I take away 1 inch, which is 96 pixels, I'm left with 960. So this is my page total. I'm telling it the area of this footer is 255 pixels. I'm having to estimate this. I'm having to look at these lines and decide based on the height of the font, the size of the graphics, the number of lines I have. I'm kind of guessing about how many inches this is going to be. What you would probably do in real life is create this, print it out, use a ruler, see how big it is, and adjust this accordingly so it fits. These numbers are very important. The footer has a dimension. Every piece of the template will have its own dimension also. Now I've noticed that 36 pixels works nice for a line description. Remember, we're having more than just the text itself. We're having the blank spaces above and below the text. You have to take that into consideration. So on my individual charge items, I'm having a height of 36. The headers, this is my first page header. I'm guessing this one at 300 pixels, which is about right. That's about 1/3 of my page. So this takes a little bit of testing, like I said, a lot of patience. So if I bring up an account that has just a one-page invoice, I can see I have my header at the top the way I want it to be. My charges look nice. My footer is showing the summary I want. The footer is at the bottom of the page. There is some white area in the middle in case this needs to have more lines of detail, but a very nice, professional looking finished product. Now be aware you can copy these templates very easily. So if I want to make changes to the invoice, I can make a copy of it. The copy appears. I can make changes with the copy and test different things and see how they look. And if I like them, I can then delete the originals, use the copy, and go forward. Oops, here's the copy I made here of demo invoice. So while you're making your changes, I would suggest working with a copy. Once you get the copy finalized, you can rename it to be the original. You can then delete the original, and be sure to set in company settings and file maintenance, confirm that you have a default invoice template selected, because you may have changed the name in the process of working with your templates. And this concludes how to work with templates. I'm sure you'll have some questions. Please feel free to email or call. Thank you. Have a nice day.